So welcome back to our panel on time testimonies, and now it's time to talk about time measurement, and more precisely about time measurement in early modern times. Time measurement in early modern times has a lot to do with public spaces. Sounds like modern time measurement systems, but it has also a lot to do with the heaven, with the stars above us. And this maybe is not so modern, but we will see. So it's my pleasure to welcome as our expert in this field, Dr. Florian Métral. Florian Métral will talk today about the astronomical clocks that were erected all over Europe at the beginning of modern times. And here you can see the first examples of these clock systems or clocks. They were not only decorated in very elaborate way, but also became very important as new symbols for civic unity, for political power, and of course also for mastery over time. Florian Métral earned his PhD in art history from the University of Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne, in 2017, and he's currently a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Fribourg in Switzerland within the research project La Ville Ornée, the decorated city. And there he is concerned with painted facades in early modern cities. Starting from February the 1st, which means in 1 week, in 2 weeks, okay. He will be a junior professor at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique. His research focuses on the representation of the universe during the early modern period, exploring the connections between visual culture, religious beliefs, and scientific knowledge. He's interested in creation cycles, in the history of the creation, in clocks and their decorations, of course, in celestial phenomena, and he has also contributed to the study of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. And why? Because there we've got a starry sky in the Sistine Chapel, and that's what he's interested in. So we are very happy to have you here, and the floor is open.
Thank you very much, Professor Amish, for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. I am very happy to be here, and I would like to thank, first of all, the Akademie for the invitation, and also I want to thank Professor Andreas Beyer from the University of Basel, because I'm here. In fact, I'm here because of a chat we had in Geneva last year about my research on public clocks and their decoration in early modern Europe, which is the topic of my conference tonight. And we do not talk about clocks or watches all the time in Switzerland, but you know it's a big deal. And actually, Andreas told me he was a bit surprised about the fact that there is no comprehensive book on this topic, not only in Switzerland, but also in Europe, at least from an art historical point of view. And this observation was indeed the very beginning of my research. I am very happy to share with you tonight. Studying these clock monuments, not from the perspective of the history of science or technology or even cultural history, as it has been done for a long time in Germany, for example, by Gerhard Dan van Rossum or more recently Gunther Ostmann, but from the standpoint of history of art. So thank you very much to Andreas, and also thanks to all of you for being here. I'm truly grateful. So let's begin with some basic idea. The history of measuring time is a long journey, but it faced a significant change with the invention of mechanical clocks in the 13th century. As we step into the early modern period, during the 15th century, European cities decorated themselves with large mechanical clocks. While some of them were placed in churches, my focus is on those located in public squares. These impressive monuments quickly became powerful symbols of civic identity. These extraordinary machines, as we used to call them, provided a rich sensory experience, especially visually, with their decoration, making them among the most expensive objects of that era. In this talk, I want to share some aspects of the long history of public clocks, and I just hope it makes you curious to learn more about it. So first part, rendezvous. We all have, I think, one story or memory related to a public clock. They are monuments of everyday life, indicating what time it is, but obviously extend beyond this primary function. They symbolize higher ideas, universal symbols linked to moments in life. For example, maybe you found yourself recently in front of a public clock to celebrate New Year's Eve, just as people did in Leipzig about a century ago. Or perhaps you've been near a public clock to protest, maybe recently, like in this photograph of the 1989 demonstration at Alexanderplatz near the world clock. Some of you maybe remember. Or maybe one day you met someone you love under a public clock, like this Milanese couple, photographed in the mid-50s. In the 19th century, Karl Spitzweg created many paintings of such romantic rendezvous, such as the farewell on the left of the screen and the eternal bridegroom on the right. What strikes me is that most of these paintings that depict bourgeois life of the time showcase splendid urban landscapes inspired by the city of Munich, where Spitzweg was born and died. In these urban landscapes, clock towers hold a significant place, even though they are located, as you can see, in the background of the pictures. These ancient clock monuments, altered or damaged, especially the painted decoration, also make Spitzweg's artworks a remarkable meditation on the cruel passing of time. So next chapter. Today we almost forget that clocks once shaped the everyday life of European cities between the 14th and the 19th century. For a simple reason, most of these clocks have disappeared. The famous Latin saying from Ovid's Metamorphosis, tempus edax rerum, and time devours all things, holds true for clock monuments. And it's interesting to see that when the English artist William Hogarth created his final engraving in 1764, depicting the end of times, he placed meaningful broken artifacts of Western civilization alongside Father Time. Especially a clock tower, I think you can see here, especially a clock tower upon which the chariot of the sun is about to crash. I have no doubt that if Hogarth lived in our time and conceived a picture on the end of time, once more, it would likely look like this kind of photograph, people taking selfies, definitely the memento mori of our time. Here you can see the famous astronomical clock of Prague. The clock tower of Venice is another historic public clock, probably the most known, praised by tourists for decades. Its fame gets a significant boost from the film industry, especially in film like this one. The movie is Moonraker from the James Bond series, and this movie features a scene set within the clock with a reconstruction completely surreal, depicting the Bond villain thrown through a glass dial, despite the actual one being made of bronze. The public clock tower in Venice has gained such fame that it now falls into the realm of simulation, echoing Jean Baudrillard's concept. I quote, "To simulate is to feign to have what one doesn't have," end of quote. This is clear in the copies made after the Venice clock towers in entertainment temples like casinos, such as here the Venetian Macao. If many European cities once had such monuments, it raises legitimate questions about the reason for their disappearance. Why are these clock monuments now missing or are in such a poor condition? On one side, there are natural causes. For example, in Ulm, the climate, the rain especially, affected the painted facades made by Martin Schaffner in 1540s. eventually leading to their full restoration in 1900. Clock monuments also faced serious disasters. For example, in Grenoble, in the middle of France, in 1651, a flood caused the collapse of the bridge and the clock tower. On the other side, there are human causes responsible for the majority of destructions. In Regensburg, for example, the negligence of the tower keeper led to the Marktum fire on 1706 and its subsequent destruction. The Marktum is the one on the left here. It takes place here. In Heilbronn Rathaus, the destruction caused by World War II nearly wiped out the clock and its 16th century decoration. But many of the most significant destruction of public clocks were not accidents, but planned actions by cities carried out in the name of progress. For example, the Altes Rathaus of Augsburg, its clock and its painted facades dated 1516, and we still have this painting from 1600 as a testimony, were completely destroyed in 1615 and replaced by a new one without decoration and without the clock. In this context, analyzing monumental public clocks, as I like to say, must start with rediscovering the horological landscapes of early modern cities. So I go back 1 second to Spitzweg because I find really this artist fascinating. In his art, public clocks, often surrounded by paintings, as seen in his Sleeping Night Watchman, are everywhere because it's just what Munich, like other cities, looked like back in the time. It's interesting to see that there was a time when urban landscapes didn't feature any monumental clocks, such as Lorenzetti's famous fresco on the effect of good government in Siena. And there is no clock for good reason. Although the invention existed at that time, the first monumental clock ever set up was in Milan during the same years. It is only during the 15th and the 16th century that clocks became part of the urban landscape of European cities, as seen in Carpaccio's painting, representing Venice both as real and fantasized. And the clock towers is outlined in the background. Just here. Yeah, it's not easy to to catch it. From that time, public clocks became part of the city skyline. In Venice, once again, the famous clock tower built at the very end of the 15th century even gave rise to a new type of representation, the vedute, or cityscape, invented by Carpaccio, as you can see in his Lion of St. Mark, date 1516. And the clock is here in the background. And this kind of vedute also were continued by 18th century artists such as Canaletto, who frequently depicted this kind of views. These horological landscapes also exist in French painting. Here it is possibly the first ever picture of the clock of the Palais de Justice, dated 3071. And let's not forget that one of the most famous paintings in the history of Western art, Johannes Vermeer's view of Delft, is a urban landscape where the perspective is precisely centered on a public clock. So now that we are aware of the importance of public clocks in urban landscapes, we must consider how to deal with all this damaged heritage, especially the clock decorations. Visual testimonies are, here again, our best ally. First, there are artworks depicting cities of the time. For instance, this painting by Sano di Pietro is the only testimony of the first clock on the tower of the Palazzo Pubblico in Siena. And the clock, which is here, shows the four evangelists in the corner and angels above. In the same way, an anonymous painting from 1600 is the only testimony of the decoration of the public clock of Reggio Emilia in the north of Italy. Second, and let's continue with the case of Reggio Emilia, we sometimes have preparatory drawings. Here, for example, here it's a drawing of Lelio Orsi for the clock tower of Reggio Emilia, who depicted the chariot of the sun, Apollo, which is a very perfect subject for a clock. Based on this, one can also consider reconstructing clock decoration with today's technology. Here is, and please forgive me, a very do-it-yourself attempt for Reggio Emilia, just to give you an idea. And the same kind of reconstruction could be attempted also for the Zieglock in Bern, decorated in the early 17th century. This journey back in the time may not be historically perfect or accurate, but it certainly allows us to reconnect with the horological landscape of European cities. So next chapter. So let's now ask, why did cities start building monumental public clocks? Like in the movie Metropolis, it's already, as you may know, a question of controlling working time. However, clocks can be reduced to being the first visible signs of capitalism. They add many other functions, as exemplified by the Tower of Mantova in the north of Italy. You can see here also the mechanism of the clock and frescoes around, dated back to the 1470s. This clock is very interesting because its designer, mathematician Bartolomeo Manfredi, detailed its use to its patron, Ludovico Gonzaga, the Marquis of Mantova, in a letter dated June 1473. After explaining the function of this astronomical clock, Manfredi states, and I quote him, "The clock also reveals favorable times for bloodletting, taking remedies, performing surgical operations, cutting and donning clothes, engaging in agricultural work, and undertaking journeys." End of quote. All this data was very useful for the Marquis and his community. But clocks were also objects of prestige, and for this reason prized by the elites. Whether they were a table clock, like here, as seen in this portrait of the French First Minister Colbert, or here, in this portrait preserved in Berlin, of a player in front of the now destroyed public clock of Treviso in the very north of Italy. This utilitarian and ornamental function of clocks is also clear in another source, which is the Claude Expelly plea, dated 1608. Among many ideas, I'm going to read here, among many ideas, he said, and I quote, "Art, use, and experience have so well learned the manner of these clocks that in every reputable city, skilled artisans and masters are capable of making them in large and monstrous masses with 1,000 ornaments." End of quote. During the Renaissance, the most famous of these monumental clocks was not a public clock, but a religious one, that of Strasbourg Cathedral from the 1570s. Some public clocks enjoyed a comparable fame to that of Strasbourg. This is the case of the clock at the Palais de Justice in Paris, reproduced here in a drawing, by the jurist Ernest van Buchel during his visit in the summer of 1585, and he was especially fascinated by the brilliance of the gold on the clock. This is also the case with the clock tower of Venice, represented in the late 1540s by Portuguese artist Francisco de Holanda, also amazed by the lavish use of materials, lapis lazuli blue and gold, and also fascinated by the automaton of the Three Kings that you can see here in a film shot in 1949.
mobili santi dei mosaici e i cavalli della basilica entrano in scena animati personaggi. Mentre i mori battono i rintocchi del tempo, essi sfilano sull'aerea ribalta della torre dell'oro.
If you've never been to Venice,
Li precede il loro araldo e nel magico leggendario Oriente veneziano si ritrovano in casa propria i re magi. È un augurio che le ore ci vengano recate dai portatori dell'oro, incenso e mirra.
you surely know the saying, time is money and money is time. And it is particularly relevant for public clocks covered in gold and precious materials as a symbol of the glory of the city itself. As seen in this painting of Venice, once again by Vecellio, these public monuments were conceived to rivalize the ornamentation of sacred building. Here you can see the clock, public clock, and the Basilica of St. Mark, like a religious building. And for that reason, public clocks are a turning point of the new power of urban elites. So next chapter, the children of Mercury. I think it's time to ask who the clockmakers are. And what are the people involved in the creation and decoration of a clock, especially a public clock? Like these two workers photographed cleaning the clock of the Sydney Town Hall. First of all, there are the artists, like Niccolò dell'Abate, the painter of the clock of Palazzo da Curzio in Bologna in 1550, of whom we still have the design here. It was destroyed like 1 century after. Another example is Paolo Uccello, one of the pioneers of Italian Renaissance painting, who decorated the clock of Florence Cathedral with the 4 evangelists in the corners. Leonardo da Vinci, for sure, is known for many drawings related to clock mechanism. Here, what it seems like a water clock, functioning with water. Hans Holbein, a close friend of mathematician and Munich instrument maker Nicolas Kratzer, likely conceived with his help this clock sold cellar. Designing, manufacturing, and decorating a clock requires multiple skills that a single artist could not possess. In this regard, it is worth noting that those we call clockmakers, the manufacturers of the mechanisms, were during the Renaissance often locksmiths or metal workers. As clocks quickly became their most prized invention, they began to appear as clockmakers in pictures of the children of Mercury, these people placed under the influence of the planet Mercury, alongside painters, sculptors, or organ makers, as you can see in this well-known manuscript. And the clockmakers are here. Can you hear the painters and the sculpture? But being a clockmaker alone is not enough to create a clock. This is where mathematicians and astronomers come into play, being, in a sense, the true clockmakers, meaning and those who perform calculations based on the observation of the events to conceive these machines. Manfredi, the designer of the Mantova clock, is one such figure, and it's interesting to note that astronomers are also considered children of Mercury, as shown in this engraving of Baldini. You can see them in the very center of the picture, surrounded again by painters, and it's interesting to see that it's facade painters. Painters, sculptors, clockmakers. In other words, we find in this picture all the people involved in the making of a clock gathered under the same celestial influence, as if this prodigious invention, the clock, had been somewhat determined by a social reality. And it's no accident that the wonderful clock by Christian Mollinger from 1787, displayed in the hall of this building, is one of the symbols of this academy. It brings together, as we now understand, science and arts. So next part, cosmic machines. So I would like in the final part of my talk to introduce you to the major subjects of the decoration of public clocks. And the first one I will discuss is the cosmological subject. Decorations on public clocks often depict iconographic programs that praise astronomical knowledge, as this science explains the universe, which was precisely compared from that time to a clock. In Mantova, this cosmological subject first appears with the figure in the center of the clock, namely a representation of the goddess Latona, the mother of Apollo and Diana, themselves considered personifications of the sun and the moon. It's also present in the frescoes around the dial, largely damaged, portraying allegories of the liberal arts, including astronomy. During the Renaissance, it was common for clocks, whether public or religious, to show portraits of famous astronomers. A very good example is the clock of the St. Nikolai Kirche in Stralsund, which displays portraits of Greeks and Muslim astronomers, namely Ptolemy here, the King of Spain, Alfonso X, Albumasar, and Ali ibn Redwan. The Zeitglocke in Bern explores another aspect of this cosmological clock decoration. As depicted in the painting description of the clock from the 1530s by Ulm chronicler Sebastian Fischer, three deities, Venus on the left, Mars in the center, and Jupiter on the right, were painted in the area above the astronomical clock. Their original meaning is better understood when we identify them as planetary gods. While Venus might not clearly indicate this, it is clear by Mars, which is joined by Aries, which is his astrological sign or house. And this association is even more explicit for Jupiter, which is joined by Sagittarius and portrayed with a star on his body. Together, these three planets suggest what astronomers call a planetary conjunction, meaning their proximity to each other for an Earth-based observer at a specific moment. Interestingly, we know that the conjunction of these three planets was visible in the sky of Bern during the summer of 1528, at the very moment of the making of the astronomical clock. This date likely hold significance given that astrological decorations frequently commemorate a founding date crucial to local history. So, next chapter, timekeepers. Astronomy was still a highly praised science among the elites, yet their primary mission during time like the 15th, 16th or 17th century was more practical and to defend the city against enemies or disasters. Recently, I had a chat with a Swiss colleague who made an insightful observation, noticed that this clock with their circular shape resembling an eye seems to watch us. Then I came across this photograph of the Kremlin clock tower, and it suddenly made a lot of sense for me. Surveillance from clock towers is not a recent invention. We know that the Zeitglocke of Bern, like many other clock towers, was an observation point over the city, as shown once again by Sebastian Fischer. Here you found the watchers. It's interesting to observe that this clock surveillance involved both real and fictitious presence. For example, painted figures of banner-bearing warriors, Bannerträger, around the clock were pretty common at the time, as seen at the Rathaus in Ulm. It's also worth noting that some of this clock decoration played on both real and fictitious presence. The Schönerturm in Munich, decorated between 1479 and 1510, also destroyed, depicted the Holy Roman Emperor and the Prince Electors, just here. symbolizing Munich's loyalty and at the same time ensuring its security by the sole power of his image. This visual expression of warfare sometimes gave rise to more ambitious decorations. For the Marktum in Regensburg, once again, Boxberger depicted the fall of the Titans from the Greco-Roman mythology, a very clear warning from the city to its enemies, using the public clock tower as a messenger. Clock of justice. So once the city is safe, maintaining order through justice stood as the chief mission of urban authorities. Public clock from the early modern era also symbolize this task, marking community life with bell rings. A clear example is Paris public clock. Not only does the clock take place on the Palace of Justice, but it is also decorated with an allegory of justice, holding the sword and the balance. Yeah, the allegory is here. While the idea of justice connected to public clocks originates in the 15th century, it became more important in town hall decoration in the 16th century, like the Basler Rathaus. Made in 1511 during the construction and decoration of the town hall, the clock shows three statues, Emperor Henry II and the Empress Kunigande on the city saints on the side, and what seemed like an allegory of justice in the middle. As said, seems like, because that figure is an allegory of justice only since the beginning of the 17th century, during the new decoration campaign of the Rathaus. Initially, the justice figure on the clock was a virgin with a child, modified by taking out the baby Jesus and incorporating a sword and a balance in the hand of the Virgin. This alteration certainly reflects the increasing emphasis on demonstrating the authority of communal justice to the people, but it also addresses iconographic challenges linked to the Protestant Reformation, officially adopted by Basel in 1529. So I jump to the conclusion. And I would like to do so with a quite unknown painting dated 1535 by Giuliano Bugiardini, a Florentine artist. In this conference, I wanted to demonstrate that monumental public clocks decoration played a key role in the early modern period within the material, political, and social history, as well as within the visual reality of cities. In Bugiardini paintings, this reality takes shape in the clock monument you can see in the background, resembling a town hall and being precisely decorated with fresco by a facade painter here. In other words, clocks show time, but above all are a discourse about time, especially visual discourse. And to support this idea, let's keep in mind that even when these machines broke down, which happened often, to be honest, they didn't lose their utility for the community precisely because of their decoration, which remained an object of fascination. From this observation, I see two significant consequences. The first concerns art history itself. The decoration of public clock prompts us to reconsider how we approach the writing of history, suggesting the need for new timelines. And I believe that one of the challenges facing the humanities in our time is to direct our attention toward the overlooked or marginalized aspects of history. The second consequence has broader implication for society and, one might say, civilization. The goal of any society is to avoid descending into violence and chaos, as depicted in the foreground of Bugiardini painting, where two communities confront each other over Dinah, according to the narrative of the Old Testament. In this context, the portrayal of the tree of the original sin, background, by the painter in the background serves as a warning aimed to the group of women in the foreground on the left. And you can follow his finger. That is the power, and yet it also illustrates the power of painting, and more broadly, the power of images, especially those in public spaces connected to clock decoration. That is the power to maintain unity and order within a community despite differences. So yes, time destroys all things, but as seen in Burjadini's painting, time can also heal and create. And probably this is the true power of public clocks and the reason that, despite mostly belonging to the past, they still hold some relevance today. And maybe this is also the reason why clock towers are still being built today, as is soon be the case in Dubai, with the Eternitas project, which, I quote the official description, set to make its mark as the tallest clock tower in the world, promising to redefine the Dubai skyline. End of quote. For sure, one more memento mori and one more symbol of the end of times. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Métral, for this fascinating insights in the history of time measurement, mostly in the history of clocks and the decoration of clocks, which leads until eternity. I'm sure that there might be some questions or remarks on. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you for the fascinating talk.
Thank you.
Some of the monumental clocks don't have 12-hour faces, but 24-hour faces. I think like the one is in Mark Square and the one in Mantua that you showed, and there was a third one, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And some of the 0 points are like quarter past the hour, or like half past, rather than 0 hour, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering if those choices are made with kind of an artistic thought in mind, or whether there's anything behind that could explain why these choices were made.
Yeah. Thank you for the very interesting question. Actually, it depends the kind of projection used by the astronomer. So usually you have like two types in Mantova. It's what we call it's the model of the astrolabe. So basically you have the other hours. Usually in Italy it's 24 hours, but I mean the 24th hour. It's not midnight like for us, but it's basically the end of the day. So it's like 6 or 7 o'clock, And sometimes, like here in Mantova, you can see also this part is light and shadows, because this clock also indicates the beginning and the end of the day. So you can have some different kind of data, and that's why in this case we speak of astronomical clock, because you have like more information than a basic clock that just gives you time. And sometimes you have also different, So like this one, it's a basic one. It's not like astrological, just a clock. But I mean the number are in reverse. Yeah. So sometimes it goes like from the left to the right, sometimes from the right to the left. Honestly, sometimes we just do not know why. Because it depends sometimes of the mechanism, and it also depends if you have, like in Florence, a clock tower, inside the building, and sometimes you also have a clock tower in the exterior of the building. So the one on the exterior, it's gonna go from the left to the right, but in the inside, from the right to the left. And so, and this is what I was just saying, the 24th hour, it's here because, basically it's the end of the day.
So, end of the day, what do you mean by end of the day? Like when people go home?
Like the sunset, yeah. Yeah, like the sunset, basically. But, basically it depends how the community manage the working time. And so, honestly, I have to, this kind of history has been made, and it's very complicated history, because you have to go really deep into the archives, and And me, I'm focused on the decoration because, but yeah, you have different kind of systems, basically.
If
Yeah.
it's not too complicated, I've never heard of the water clock. Could you tell me like how it works? If it's not too complicated, like the basic idea.
Yeah. Usually clocks are very complicated mechanisms. But for yeah, but for the water clock, maybe I'm gonna go with the. I'm not sure where was it actually. Oh, maybe I missed it. Maybe I missed it.
It was a drawing.
Yep. Sorry for the.
I'll recognize it. No.
Yep. It's here. Maybe no.
No.
Oh yeah.
Oh, but yes.
Yeah, actually this one is very complicated because it's drawing of Leonardo da Vinci, and basically we do not know. There is a lot of scholarship about the fact of what it is exactly, but it's supposed to be like water clock or some kind of clock. But I'm gonna speak generally about the water clock. Usually it's basically the same kind of mechanism, but despite using the weight for the clock, you use the water. So that goes inside like a tunnel and then put some mechanism on. But honestly, most of them are some kind of myth during the early modern times, because when we speak about the water clocks, usually we speak about the clepsydra, which was the instrument used by Egyptian to measuring things, and not especially time, but also different kind of things that need to be measured. So yeah, basically you use the water as a force to be.
Time for one more question.
There's time if nobody else has any questions. But just to understand correctly, so depending on what clock you were using in a public place, the place could disagree as to what time it is. So they could be like, now it's 24th hour here because it's sunset, according to the clock that we have. But in a different place, it might either be using a 12-hour clock and then it's 6 p.m. or something.
Yeah.
And so they would also disagree as to what day it is, right, as a result.
Yeah. And sometimes we know that in Italy, for example, in Florence, it's not the same than in Rome. It's not the same than in Venice. So like every city use different kind of measuring time, and with different way to interpret the hours. So yeah, sometimes it could be like super complicated, and also because I just speak of that very, very quickly. But sometimes and very often the clocks broke down. And we know that it broke down a lot because we have a lot of archival documents, and we can know where it just stopped. And that's because they need to have like a master of clock. And those kind of person were very valuable for a city, but it was hard to keep them because you need to pay them like well, and they need to have like some sons to manage all the clock. And for example, in Venice, this clock was based on the model of the Reggio Emilia clock, which was made by a famous Italian family who are called the Ranieri. And basically Venice just afforded them a bunch of money to come to Venice, and they just leave Reggio Emilia, which is a very small city in the center of Italy, to go to Venice.
Thank you very much for this fascinating talk that made very clear that when we are talking about time measurement, we are not just talking about clocks. We are talking about the public sphere, we are talking about religious, political, military functions, and so on. And we are also talking about defining night and day. So there's a lot of to think about during the hours to come. And thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jay.